comparison is the thief of joy. So if you don't go into this with this mentality that this is like, winner take all type of thing, and you see it instead as a joint endeavor, then you're always showing up to support one another in wherever direction this is.
We just, in all of our situations, I'm sure we get focused on what's in front of us. And how do we actually create the space to stop and pause to understand that, you know what, if I spend 3 more hours on this, it's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
But by stopping there and saying, you know what, in this moment, I'm going to take my attention from that, and you're going to be the most important thing in my world right now.
And so everything brings us back to how is the situation kind of adding to us? How are we making sure we're extracting the joy and the positive, and what's the discipline around that?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sundays with Vernā. This is our Black Love Happy Valentine's Day episode. We talk about so many serious issues on this show, and Black love is definitely a serious issue, but we don't get to talk about love that much. So I'm really excited to introduce to you two fabulous individuals who actually make a brilliant couple, Dr. Oneeka Williams and Dr. Charles Anderson. Welcome to Sundays with Vernā, Oneeka and Charles.
Thank you so much.
Good to be here.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this fantastic couple. Okay, so first, I'm going to put you first now, Charles. So Dr. Charles Anderson is an award-winning physician, leader, healthcare executive, and a health equity advocate. He's dedicated over 25 years to advancing healthcare, in particular the Boston area. And he is the president and the CEO of Dimock Center in Roxbury, Massachusetts, where he spearheads community health initiatives to improve racial equity, empowering families, and improving newborn outcomes. So important, the work that you're doing. And I'm so excited that you're getting to tell us more about your whole career and this amazing woman who you are married to, Dr. Oneeka Williams, who is sometimes referred to as the positive health doc. She is a Harvard Medical School trained urologic surgeon. She's award-winning author and trailblazing visionary. She really does all of this amazing work to care for her patients, but also she's an author of these incredible books. Dr. Didi Dynamo is her other personality, and she's written these books for girls in particular and underrepresented children. And the good news is that we actually have Oneeka in another episode later on in this month. So you can find much more out about Oneeka and her work. So welcome. And, my first question here is how long? So how long have you two been married?
Oh, it'll be 33 years.
Whoa. Yeah, I know. Oneeka's like,
33 years. How about that?
I can't believe this, because I met these fabulous people years and years ago when I was in Boston. And wow, 33 years.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just like a celebration in itself, right?
It is. And if you tack on the 7 years prior to that,
That's right.
Yes.
it's over 40 years of knowing each other.
Know each other.
You don't even look like you could be that old. I mean,
No.
you're like, so,
33.
okay, so where did you guys meet?
Nursery school.
Right?
Okay, well, where we met at Johns Hopkins. I was an undergraduate and Charles was a medical student, and Charles will say he has to clean it up. So it really kind of depends who tells the story on how exactly we met, but that's where we met.
I know. Okay, so we don't have time for all of the versions of the story. I love that when you're talking to couples and they're like, well, we know we met this way. And the other person's like, well, no, really, that is not exactly what happened. Okay, give me a short version of how you all knew that each other was the one.
Well, one thing I do want to clear up is I was not this medical student going down and
Praying.
undergraduate students. When I landed at medical school at Johns Hopkins, I was 19. So that was my cohort of people. I was also a DJ at the time. So I was doing parties both at the medical school and doing parties at the undergraduate school. And it happened to be one of the parties I was doing. I believe it was your freshman year party, pool party. I remember it well. I was DJing there, and of course she caught my eye. And they, as they would say, the rest was history.
And he said, I'm DJ Charles. Do you know who I am? I'm like,
Of course.
not really.
That was a strong move, though, Charles. That was a strong move.
It is true.
Yeah.
And that made it work. It was good that you didn't. Right? You're just like, no, you're just any old guy. I'm like, okay, I can make that work.
Yeah, you can make that work, right? So I'm going to jump right into it, which is, like I said, this is sort of a celebration of Black love, but love also just generally, like we need so much of it these days. I wondered like what lessons you have taken from this long relationship that you've had. What have you learned? And like you said, you guys have been together since you were children almost, but certainly we know like at 19, what we know at 19 and what we know now is very different. So tell us about the lessons of love that you've learned as you've grown together.
Patience is a big part of it. Life changes, we change. In many ways, we are the same people we were when we met, but life happens. And as life happens, we gain better understanding of who we are and our place in the world. And we do that journey together. I think it's a lot of the twists and turns of life and having the ability to step back and say, regardless of what those twists and turns are, we're in this together and we're going to figure it out together. So the patience is a big part of it. That'd be what I'd add.
Yeah. And I think love is an action word. It's a verb. And certainly I think what we've learned over the years as life evolves, we change. That at the anchor for us, at the root of our love is God's love for us, and God's love for us manifests in our love for each other. And so really having that kind of spiritual grounding, which has grown over the years, and the more challenged life becomes, the more you realize that there's a solid rock that you have to hold on to, and that helps to bring you together. I think we've also learned that communication is a huge part of our relationship because, as you can imagine, easy to get caught up, distracted, misinterpret, so many different things if you're not really building on communication. And that in itself is a journey. And it certainly was a journey for us because we communicate very differently.
Yeah. So explain what's the difference like?
Yeah. I would say my communication tends to be, and I'll probably use Oneeka's term, more roundabout.
Circular, there's a little circularity going on.
Circular, but also I like to take in a lot of data, right? I like to make it as data informed as possible, so I'm one, let's take our time, let's figure it out, let's understand it. And that's probably why I'm more of the pediatrician of the family in terms of the medicine. And Oneeka, on the other hand, is the surgeon. She's just like, let's just cut it out. Let's just deal with it.
I love that.
And I think that coming out of my West Indian upbringing, I would say our culture was not very touchy-feely. We didn't talk a lot about, stuff. It was just get stuff done, about the business of going about what you need to do. And all of the other kind of fluff was not part of my upbringing. And so Charles talks a lot. And when I certainly, when we first met, I was like, this guy is just talking. Why is But I have grown to understand the value of talking. And so our communication has really, kind of not only evolved, but transformed. And now we're able to appreciate that we're going to come at things differently, but we'll ultimately get to the point that really serves us both and really helps to come to, whether we're resolving an issue, whatever, we're able to bring it together to come to a resolution, and a way to move forward in a way that is kind, that is caring, that extends a lot of grace and just understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about the spiritual foundation. It made me think about Pastor Thompson and Gilbert Thompson in Boston, who used to be my pastor for a really long time, and he used to say that being in love is like falling in love with a new person, like every 5 or 10 years. Right. That you're learning to love the development of an individual and like accepting that they're not going to stay the same. On the other hand, you're also getting used to how people operate. And like you said, Oneeka, learning to appreciate it, right? Because when you have contempt for difference, that's where it really gets ugly, right? So you're constantly working on trying to be like, you're like, okay, it's going to take him 5 days. So let me figure out how to get the information up earlier, right? It's like you learn to adjust how you approach the other person.
Yeah. And you realize the value that there is a lot of value sometimes in taking in the data, in analyzing it, in turning it upside down and jumping right in sometimes is not the right approach. So it's creating that harmony and balance that I think really works well in our relationship. And love is work. Marriage is work. It never stops.
No,
Charles,
it's
do
good.
you want to add to that?
No,
Do you
it's
want
good
to?
point.
Yeah.
Just simply, there's times where you do have to act and you do have to move. And so learning that together has been really important. One thing I will stress this concept of love, though, as well, is that, I think through relationships, we learn a lot about what love is, even beyond that relationship. I think the love that we've experienced together has extended to the way we love our friends, our family. And for me, it's been a real example of the way God loves me, allows me to show up in the world despite things that come at me, knowing that I have a father as well who loves me and cares for me. So I do think this opportunity to be in a relationship like this, if one really leans into it and understands, as challenging as it may be, there's a lot to be learned just about how we learn to care for each other and show up in the world because we're called to love. That is, it's not much more complicated than that in my mind. That's what we're here to do, is to love one another.
And we're all deserving of love. Like we each, it's our birthright. We deserve to be loved. And if you're in a place where you feel like you're not being loved the way you deserve to be loved, then it's probably not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
And, when you feel that love, that's how you're able to show it with joy, no matter what's going on. Right? It is like that child who's in that situation and they know that mom and dad love me and they have that exam that doesn't go that well. It helps them show up knowing that, what, mom and dad love me. It's going to be all right, and there's joy.
Yes. I think you're talking also about unconditional love, and you do have a kid. So I want to hear about what it's like to have these like two powerful parents and the kid. Like, how was parenting and what did you learn from that?
That's when you really learn how you have to have patience with one another, because you're in that situation where something that's the most important thing to both of you, right? And our journey to Mark was a real journey, a journey of infertility and the challenges there. So when this little rascal showed up, it was just like, look, it has to be perfect. It has to be. So that's where you have these real opportunities to wrestle with things and learn to work together in the best interest of someone we cared so much about. So that in itself was an incredible journey, which I think even strengthened our understanding and love for each other.
Yeah. Mark is how old now?
Mark is 18, and it's so funny because it's always interesting. We might say one thing and be curious to hear what Mark would say, but we call him Miracle Mark, and he really is. We always say he is kind of the amalgamation of the best of both of us, and so recognizing that gift, choosing to prioritize him over all else was, I think, one of the very conscious decisions that we made when we had him, was that we were going to have him in probably our home for 17 to 18 years. And then he's launched into the world. And I think that we did a great job of prioritizing him. And even though based on our own kind of philosophies and backgrounds, we might have had different approaches, I think we found a middle ground. And I would say that from our perspective of what is kind of our defining philosophy as a family, it's really grounding in positive habits. And so we've applied that to our marriage and we've applied that to raising Mark. And so everything brings us back to how is the situation kind of adding to us? How are we making sure we're extracting the joy and the positive, and what's the discipline around that? And I think Mark has internalized that as well and recognized that within our household, we always came back to that. And so I think I don't think we had major tussles, but every relationship has a difference of opinion. And I think creating the space to respect that, to affirm that it's okay, to validate that it is okay, and then to come back to, well, what will serve him best? And that there are 10 ways to skin a cat. And ultimately, I think we're doing a fast now with the Pastor Howard John Wesley in Arlington, Virginia. And I think the prayer today was not always feeling like you have to be right. You don't always have to be right. And so recognizing that in relationship is really, really important.
Yeah. No, and it plays out, you watch them. I always remember the situation where Oneeka and Mark spent a lot of time doing this project. And it was a project where they had to he decided to take lemons and make this amazing lemonade. And they spent hours preparing this, and they had this special container to dispense the lemonade, and we're rushing out in the morning to school, which we often did. And I put the lemonade container by the door, and I open the door to the car, and what happens? It knocks it over. And we're rushing, trying to get out. And so I looked at Mark, and Mark looks at me and says, "That's okay, Daddy. We can make it better." And we go inside, and that's what we do. But it's that attitude of just, here he is as a 6 or 7-year-old, and be able to have that internalized sense that things are going to happen. You're going to knock over lemonade. There's got to be, but you know what? We can always make it better. We got it and had a good time. Remake it. And we were late, as we often were for school. So nothing terribly different. But I think that's the example that he's carried that through with him today. That ability to just take things that come at him and know that, right, I can utilize these habits that I've learned in my house, and I can turn everything around for good. It's really amazing to watch him at this stage. And he's doing these things on his own. He's grown. He's making his own decisions right now. And it's really fun to watch.
Wow. I love that story. We're always talking about making lemonade out of lemons, right? And he's like a little bit of the reverse, but his idea of positive habits, which I know, Oneeka, you actually have sort of integrated into your writing and also your practice. Can you share what those are? And the other thing is, I know people want to hear like specifics, like how did you make decisions differently based on this foundation, these principles, this idea of like putting Mark first as like a really important way to help you decipher like what you're going to do, how you're going to do it in your profession and in your family?
Yeah, one of the things certainly for me growing up is that our parents almost never left us alone, to the extent that they very rarely went to events without us. If we couldn't go as a family, they rarely would go. They didn't travel without us. So I grew up in a family where we just did a lot of things together, and our parents were very present. And so for me, it was really important to have that dynamic with Mark. And we had waited for a long time to have Mark. It was quite a journey to do that. And so it was not difficult to choose him. I would also say that we would then, sometimes Charles would go or I would go. And so it would not necessarily mean that we would put off every single type of professional engagement or making those tough choices of things that you just had to do. But we would always make sure that we considered, and if both of us had to go, it would be we have grandparents around. We had my twin brother and his wife and their boys around. So we knew that there was a safe, secure place where we could leave him and that he'd still feel that familial presence and familial love. So I think that was really, I think, so certainly, and I think for Charles, similarly, we were blessed to have an upbringing where we had that kind of family relationship. In terms of, do you want to say anything before I dive?
No, I do think the blessing there, because every time we say that and I think about it, it is a blessing, right? Some would call it a privilege. We were able to have my mom be here for his first 3 years of his life. And, also take him to the Science Museum and the Children's Museum, and that sort of engagement and the special relationship, the bond that they developed. We were blessed in having Oneeka's brother a mile away, and they happened to have a son who was just a few months younger than Mark, and they grew up like twins. And to be able to engage that way, we're blessed to have the means to be able. So I don't take those things for granted at all. Those are incredible blessings. And but at the same time, what we said is let's not squander those blessings. Let's really lean in and utilize them. So when I had the opportunity because of my career path and to be able to do different things, it was easy for me to say, you know what? I'm going to do something that allows me to make sure I'm at every basketball game. And not only at every basketball game, I'm going to coach first and second grade basketball, right? I'm going to coach little league baseball. You know, I knew nothing about baseball. And I'm going to do those. And I'm going to show them how we work together as a team and work with others. And we win. And he'll tell you now, he's still waiting for me to go coach the Buffalo Bills because he's like, Daddy, every time you coach, we win. So, but, you know, but it's been a blessing, you know, and again, I don't want anyone to take away from this conversation. We know it's difficult when you don't have access to the sorts of tools and things that we have access to. But I think that's where these habits of positivity come in, because regardless of what tools one has, one does have blessings, and all of us have privilege. And I think the habits of positivity, which Oneeka will expand on, really help remind us of that.
Yep. And I think the one other thing I would add is also setting intention around building community, whether it's your church community, community within your schools, communities within your peers. We had a lot of our friends who had children around the same age. And so we were very intentional about creating a collective where we could support each other in community. And that doesn't take a lot of means. It just takes a will and a desire to go out to a park or to go out to a walk or to, you know, get together and just break bread together and allow the kids to play together. We did a lot of that. And that you could see even to this day, when we get together for, you know, Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter, we have been doing it with these families from before our children were born. So that makes a big difference. And just briefly, I mean, I think everything starts with an intention and with a belief system. And really what the habits of positivity are about creating a belief system. The first is there is always a solution. You just have to work to find it. And if you actually believe that there is always a solution and you just have to work, it already creates an empowerment within you that we're going to find a way to be able to navigate this process. And it's not necessarily an answer and it's going to fix something, but it's the solution, which is the Latin word, the root of the Latin word, solue, which means to untie a knot. So all it means is the process by which you're going to untie the problem and then try to figure out how you're going to access resources, build on your own kind of internal, you know, faith or strength or whatever it is. It brings you into how can I, you know, be effective in finding the ways to make this situation better. One, believing that every challenge we can convert to an opportunity. So a lot of people say, oh, every cloud has a silver lining. Every limit is an opportunity to do something, to find something, to access something. And if you see it in that way, for every challenge that we've had in our families, you know, we all, you know, it doesn't start immediately like, oh, well, I'm going to convert this into an opportunity. You know, you're going to go through the necessary, just, you know, disappointment or just sadness or, you know, feelings of anger. You have to create space to process your emotions authentically. But then it's like a pendulum that swings you all to the extreme and then brings you back to center. And the more that you're able to internalize and integrate these habits into your life, you find that the swing of the pendulum is not quite so extreme. So it doesn't take you as long to get back to that place of center. The third, there's, you know, we can hold on to the positives and discard the negatives. There again, the process of doing that work means that it doesn't happen automatically. You have to create space to engage with whatever the negative issue is, but then you're going to have to let it go so that it doesn't really, just completely deplete and kill you, because that's what negativity does. It takes away from you. So if you hold on to it, it's constantly draining you. The fourth is just believing that we have a divine purpose that we are here for. Each of us, no matter what your circumstance, no matter what your station, no matter where you came from, like you were designed and designated to be here at this point in time. And it's all integrated and it's linked to caring for others. So if we carry that in terms of how do we care, like whatever the problem is that we're encountering, like I'm supposed to be in this moment with Charles, with Mark, with whomever, and there's something in it that is going to elevate whatever our circumstance is. And so believing that means that you find the way that we are empowered in spite of, whatever the situation. And then the fifth is just gratitude, being thankful And I think gratitude and negativity just can't coexist. And so when you get to the place of, okay, this is going wrong, but I'm thankful for, you begin to use that as really an antidote to the negativity and all the negative things that tend to pull at us and tend to want to take us all, kind of just the joy that we are meant to live with.
When you talk about the positivity, that's really what I hear, where you're like, yes, process your feelings, don't be in denial, but also don't be in denial that there's a whole nother side, opportunity. And I, in marriage in particular, I think, it is very much about finding that other side or finding that angle, and that actually allows you, right, to explore yourself.
Yeah.
First and foremost, and then your partner, that's another thing, right? It's like, what do I need to do with myself? Now, it's so much easier to pay attention to your partner and where your partner needs to work, right? But also just taking these on as personal commitments. And the other thing that you said, Oneeka, that I thought was really powerful is this idea of, I'm here for this reason. Like, this moment in time, it's not a fluke. It's not like, this is actually, this relationship that I'm in is for me, right? It's not like I'm going to push it away. It's like, what about where we are in this moment, who I am, that this is for, that this situation, whether it's positive or whether it's difficult, that this situation can really help me and my growth so that I can help others. I think the point about community is so important, whether you're married or you're not married, right? Like, whether it's about your in-laws or or whether it's about your girlfriend or any of those things, that we need help to really understand how to be in love with other people, and then also what we need to do to love ourselves. So what I'd love to hear from both of you is, what's your sort of advice for couples to maintain a loving, exciting, and joyful relationship, no matter how they're positioned?
I think the one thing that's really important is marriage requires one to really lean into what being humble is like. If you really, really lean into the fact that a marriage, a relationship requires humility, that humility spills over into other things. I don't think about myself as all that in a bag of chips. I really don't. And so with that, as we're interacting, we're not interacting in a way that even enters the conversation. This process has...
You mean you don't say, I'm the CEO of Dimock? You need to listen to me? Like, well...
I don't. What I will say is, there are times where I'll say, I have a feeling about this that's based on whatever my experience is. And it might be my experience as a guitarist in a praise and worship team. It might, whatever. We all bring experiences to it. But it's not because I have some degree or title or the rest of that. It is about how we take advantage of our experiences to solve those problems, to engage in finding solutions. But it's never been about my title, our titles. It's about our collective ability to do the things that we're called to do, whether it be raise our son or show up in community.
Well, and I will definitely co-sign on that. And from the perspective of, if you believe that you have been put together for a purpose, and that purpose extends outside of the individual, your individual self, but that there's a collective force that you galvanize to do the kingdom work. If you believe that, then you see yourself as a collective and not as these individuals just showing up. It doesn't mean that you lose your individuality within your marriage. We have not. We still have individual interests, but we recognize that we are stronger together than we are individually. And there's a trust. I think that marriage, we've talked about the importance of trust, trusting that this person who God has put you with has your best interests at heart. You affirm them because you believe that they were specifically designed for you and you for them. So the extension of grace, the extension of trust that makes you believe that this person has your best interests at heart. So if you don't go into it thinking that competition, we say, is the thief of joy, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. So if you don't go into this with this mentality that this is like, winner take all type of thing, and you see it instead as a joint endeavor, then you're always showing up to support one another in wherever direction. This is, I feel like our family is like an orchestra. I mean, there's a harmony to it, and it's not everybody playing, all the instruments, at the highest volume at all times, but there's a dance of interaction. There's a one time, one instrument gets lower, one instrument doesn't play. But the harmony and the beautiful production that result is because of those undulations, because of just that, the interest, one person playing, one person not playing, person coming together. So it's an orchestra, and we work together, and we believe that that's what we were called to do.
The thing I would add, though, I think sometimes people get confused, though. I do think sometimes this concept of competition gets extrapolated from the fact that you do have two individuals who have to have those times where they have to be focused on what's in front of them, right? And so sometimes I think we get into this, am I competing with? No, sometimes it's, I just have to focus on what's in front of me. And I think we've learned to understand that. And in that focus, that has to be more important sometimes because I've got a deadline or I've got, this board presentation, whatever it may be. And so learning to understand that that is part of what we do as individuals. And if anything, there are probably more times where it's, I wish I could have more of your time from that. So it's not really competing about who's going to do what. I think sometimes we just, in all of our situations, I'm sure we get focused on what's in front of us and how do we actually create the space to stop and pause to understand that, what, I spend 3 more hours on this, it's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
But by stopping there and saying, what, in this moment, I'm going to take my attention from that, and you're going to be the most important thing in my world right now. Learning to do that more.
Yeah, and the trust, right? Because if I'm in the operating room and I'm on call and I have to go out at 2 a.m, despite the fact that maybe he was thinking we were going to cuddle, it's like, well, that
I'm on call.
I'm on call. But he understands that, and he trusts that. I mean, that's part of my calling, right? It's part of what I do and the assignments that I've been called to within the work that I do. So it is the trust and it is the understanding that, I think rightly so, most of the competition. Where you work? Are you working today? You were called this weekend.
Yeah. So you said trust, really important. You started off with patience, communication, understanding, humility. That's a lot. Those are a lot of really sort of, I would say, high level evolutions of ourselves, right? We're learning to be not so ego driven,
yes,
not so, and really remembering the flexibility that is needed. Yeah. In its life with our fellow human being. Yeah, to really enjoy and embrace them. I'm just going to leave you with this one question, which is, when you have personal difficulty, like something is happening within you, you don't actually know what it is. You can't even really truly communicate it to anyone else. How have you had a situation like that? How have you handled it? And what has that taught you with regard to how you relate?
Yeah, I'd say, Renee, that happens a lot. I think life comes at you and you have a hard time with how you're going to process that. And quite honestly, that's where I personally realize the gift that this is. Because I can sit there, I don't even have to say anything. She can see it on my face. She can see it, sense how I'm turning at night when I sleep. She can see it how I walk. I don't have to say anything. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And that's the beauty of this. That's why the investment, right? Because it does help one in those situations that happen constantly, where we struggle with our emotion of what this is and what it means. And we're trying to figure all that out. And boy, when you have a partner with the trusted relationship and all the other pieces that are there, it really, really, that's how we get through those things, quite honestly. And I would say and it comes back to community, because I do want to say this is special, what God does in a marriage. But understand, this is about two people dedicating themselves to loving one another, despite what's going on And I would say that all of us should have at least someone in our lives, whether we're married or not, that we're able to do that with. Because life's going to come at you, and we need this.
Yeah. And I think that, going back to community, I mean, I think that there's certainly times, I mean, certainly I'm intuitive, Charles is intuitive. We know when something is just not quite right. But I would also say that there's something that I know Charles is just not going to want to hear. And, and I'll say, so I'm going to go talk to my sister friend, X, Y, and Z. Because I'm like, he's not trying to, he's like, is it a housewives thing?
Right.
I know that, and that there's certain deep things, I have very, very good friends. And sometimes, especially, I mean, also Charles might be completely inundated with something. So it's having the sense of when does he have capacity to deal with what I need him to deal with? And then knowing just because of who we are that, okay, this might not be the time to kind of talk to him about this, but that I do have other spaces and relationships, trusted relationships, handful, where I also know that there's a place that I can have, that space to just unload. And I think it's very important to have those good friends. And Charles, and then there are lots of people who have, I haven't taken the plunge yet, but, even things like having a therapist. So there are places, where is the safe place for you? If it can't always be your partner because there's, other stuff kind of swirling around, where is a safe space that you can also find that gives you an opportunity to unload and to be able to have that just uncensored, unfettered way of just sharing your innermost self.
Yeah. And that's important. This is not my therapist.
Yes.
I think it's really, really important. You need a therapist, get a therapist. Don't expect your wife, your best friend to be your therapist, right? That's a different relationship, right?
Yes.
My therapist is my therapist. Stuff we engage in is what he is trained in being able to do that work and to be able to listen and support in that way. To get into a bad place if you expect your best friend, your wife, to be your therapist. That's not the job.
Thank you for making that clear. And you all, thank you so much for giving us your time. And for all you do, both as individuals and parents and all community members, and incredible work that you do with your patients and the larger community. We are so grateful for you stopping by to share your love with us. And we just are thanking you and giving you great blessings. And everybody actually tune back in to Sundays with Vernā to hear more about Oneeka's incredible work as well. And thank you again. Bless you.
Thank you so much, Vernā, and have fun together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your audience with us.